If you'd like to, you can just turn your Bibles to Song of Solomon chapter 8. And I'm going to have all my scriptures up on the screen, but I found it in my study, and I think it might be proved the same for you as I teach, that it's nice to have this text open, and you can just kind of refer back to it. That's why I asked you to turn there or recommend that. Tonight's study is the second to last study, I believe that Ed will be closing out the series on the Song of Solomon, not next Wednesday, maybe, but the one after. Is that right, Ed? So 2 weeks from today, and then we'll move on to, I almost said bigger and better things. I don't know. We'll move on to different things in the Bible. By the way of announcement, we're going to study 1 John. At least I'm going to teach through 1 John. There's a couple of brothers that have agreed to teach through it with me, and so at least 1 John will be on the horizon. But tonight, let's focus on Song of Solomon, chapter 8, specifically verses 4 through 7, in a study I've called 6 Things You Need to Know About True Love. And if you've ever watched The Princess Bride, maybe you got the lingo there. True love. This is particularly, I would say, for young people. And those of us or those of you that have not broached marriage yet, or maybe you're thinking about marriage, maybe you're a teenager and you really are far, far away, these are still things that you need to know about true love, because there's so much false information about what love really is. Well, what we want to do is, as before, I'm going to color code the text so you'll know if the Shulamite, the bride, is talking, she'll be in purple, and if the daughters of Jerusalem are talking, they'll be in neutral color black. And the husband, the beloved, does not talk at all in these verses, so it'll just be those two. So let's get into it. I'm going to be reading from the ESV. So the Shulamite starts off, she says, "I adjure you, daughters of Jerusalem, that you do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases." Now, that verse is actually, I think Thomas covered it at the end of his section, and I thought it kind of went well with both sections. It's kind of a transitionary verse. So she starts off telling the daughters of Jerusalem, the young ladies in the nation of Israel, don't stir up or awaken love until it pleases. Then they say, who is that coming up from the wilderness, leaning on her beloved? And they're saying this to the audience that's listening to this song or drama. And the Shulamite begins to speak, and they're kind of listening in. The daughters of Jerusalem are listening to this. She says to her beloved, "Under the apple tree I awakened you. There your mother was in labor with you. There she who bore you was in labor. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. For love is strong as death. Jealousy is fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he would utterly be despised." So there's a lot there, really, a lot packed into these 4 verses. And out of that, as you can tell from the title, there's 6 things that we want to learn. But before we get there, I want to just kind of, as I like to do, especially with poetry, notice a few structural items. And in particular, comparing how we started off, the song started off, and noticing how it's closing, because there's a lot of mirroring. And I know it's been a while since we talked about the first chapter of the song, and you've probably long forgotten what any of that was about or what it said, unless you've been taking time to read through the song. Let's just assume that you haven't been taking time. So let me bring to your attention some things that are brought back into view here. So this is the conclusion of the song. It starts with these verses that I just read to you, and it will extend into the ones that will wrap it up in Ed's talk through verse 14. So I would call this the conclusion of the song. Some people call it the climax of the song. This is the crescendo where the chorus gets loud, I guess, and everything closes out. And in this scene, in this closing scene, all of the characters are going to reappear from the whole song. And I thought that was really interesting. I had to have that brought to my attention. But you know how sometimes at a play, if you've ever been to a play, then all the characters sometimes will come out onto the stage and they'll all sing a final chorus all together. Sometimes they'll do that on musical movies and stuff. Well, this, you can imagine it like that. And so the Shulamite comes out and she speaks and she sings, and so do the daughters of Jerusalem, and so do her brothers, the brothers of the Shulamite. So does the beloved. Not in this text, but in the next verses that will be covered next. And then Solomon makes an appearance in verse 12. He's talked about. And so they're all on the stage, if you can imagine, all singing or being sung to or sung about. And beyond that, there's several, I call them bookends. That's not original to me. But if you could imagine in Scripture, sometimes a lot of times books of the Bible will start off with talking about something, and that thing pops up at the very end. And it's as if those two things form a kind of a holding of everything that's in between, kind of like bookends do. I know we've talked about that before, but some of you haven't heard it. So just imagine the first chapter of the song and the last chapter of the song are kind of holding everything else together and informing us about what's in the middle. That's some features I'll draw to your attention here. So notice that the Shulamite's brothers appear only in the first chapter, chapter 1, verse 6, and in chapter 8 and verses 8 through 9. And so those are two kind of features that are not accidental, but they appear at the beginning and the end. There are brief references to Solomon in chapter 1, verse 5, and in chapter 8 and verse 12. I think there may be one other reference. I know there's at least one other reference in chapter 3, perhaps another, but I think that there's just one more reference in the book about Solomon specifically. The word companions or friends, it's the same idea, appears only in chapter 1, verse 6, and in chapter 8, verse 13. There's a vineyard theme in chapter 1, and it reappears in chapter 8. And then also notice that this key phrase, which I'm about to put on the screen, is repeated, this famous statement that we've noticed throughout the teaching. It's repeated 3 times throughout the song. It's specifically repeated at the very beginning of the song and at the very end here. At the very beginning in chapter 2 and verse 7, the Shulamite says to the daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you, do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. And then she says the same thing to the daughters of Jerusalem at the very end. You can see there at chapter 8 and verse 4. And so that kind of tells us if these are the bookends and this is telling us what's in between, this is telling us that the Song of Solomon is God's book to young women. If Proverbs is God's book to young men, the Song of Solomon is God's book to young women about love, specifically, true love. Notice these two passages that repeat this emphasis on love in the first and the last chapters. In the first chapter, the Shulamite said, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is better than wine. And at the very end, she says that love is strong as death. Now, those are two very different images, but they're both bringing out and comparing love to something that kind of gets to the heart, helps these young ladies understand some important features. We're going to learn how it's as strong as death, what that really means in just a moment. That's one of the 6 things that you need to know about true love. But nonetheless, the beginning of the song and the end of the song are both about love. And so that tells us this song is about love. And that's what I said before. The Song of Songs is God's book about love for young ladies. And so that's kind of where we're at. We're at the conclusion of this, and that's been the message to this point. Now, the second part that I'd like to go over with you is the story of what we just read in these verses. And instead of reading it again, I want to just kind of tell it to you because I know how it is. You read a text and it just, and it helps to have it just made very, very simple. And so if you read the text again, you'll notice that it's kind of like these daughters of Jerusalem and the Shulamite sit down for a coffee date, and they're talking about love and all the deep things, that girls like to chat about. And so she's telling them, now listen to me, girls. Don't stir up or awaken love until the time is right. She says specifically the Old English, until it pleases. And so you can imagine that's a summary of their 3-hour deep conversation, as girls don't get together for coffee for less than 3 hours. And so anyways, then it kind of goes to the next scene. It skips. And the next thing you see is these daughters of Jerusalem, and this has happened before where the person that's speaking is kind of looking out of a window. Well, here it doesn't say there's a window they're looking out of, but you can imagine they're looking out of a window and they say, who's this that's coming up from the wilderness? They're coming out of the wilderness. And interestingly, in Israel, in Jerusalem, you had to come out of the wilderness and go up to Jerusalem. So maybe they're looking on from the top of Jerusalem, and there's this woman, the Shulamite, and she's leaning on her beloved husband. And I don't know how you do that while you're walking, but that's what's happening. She's leaning on his chest or leaning on his shoulder, and that shows a great intimacy. And while there's a lot of description of their sexual relationship earlier in the song, this is not really anything about that. It doesn't seem to be. It's more just showing the close-knit friendship that they've developed. You know, the longer you're in love, and especially at the end of your life, it's a lot less about that physical relationship and a lot more about that friendship. It's got to be for other reasons that many of us are aware of, but that's just kind of how that all works. And hopefully, if you're doing it right, true love is growing inside of you. Then you'll get that friendship will get deeper, and that's what I've always been told, and that's what I have experienced at least to this point. But that's what they're seeing. They see them coming out of the wilderness, and she's leaning on his breast. And so then they kind of listen in, because as they get closer, you can imagine they start to hear what they're talking about. And don't you just love to hear some juicy stuff from a couple and listen to what are they talking about? I jest. I really don't care what most couples are talking about. I'm not going to be listening in, but there's some people that they just love to hear that, inside conversation. And so they hear the inside conversation, and the woman is saying to her husband, she's doing all the talking. And that's natural that women literally say more words in a day than men do. That's nothing against women. That's just the facts. And she does all the talking. And she says, I awakened you under the apple tree. And she must be talking about some time back in the past. And she says, and there was the same apple tree where your mother was in labor with you. And that's kind of a weird conversation. She brings up her mother. We're going to talk about why she does that maybe. And then beyond that, she goes into these descriptions about what love is like. And she says it's as strong as death and the grave. That's not a very romantic image, but that's what she says. And she says there's not enough water or floods that could quench true love. And then she says it's like the very flame of the Lord. And so she goes into this beautiful description. Some people, I don't know, some people might not think it's beautiful, but she's describing love and her love for her husband. And so these women, these young ladies of Jerusalem are listening in, and they're hearing all this, and the Shulamite's saying it for their benefit. She wants them to hear this and understand it. And so that's kind of the story of what's going on, and I should have put this up before. That's the outline of everything that we just reviewed. So now maybe you have an image to go with the conversation. That's what's being said. That's what's going on. Now, we'll get to the 6 things that you should know about true love. And so we're going to probe a little deeper, and we're going to break down some of these things that are said between the two speakers. The first thing that I would tell you about true love, according to the Bible, and this is my summary of what is said in verse 4 at least, is that love is not a game. And for a lot of people, dating is a game for them. And from this verse, in verse 4, it's not a game. If you are wise. Now, if you're a fool, then yeah, it's just a game. But this is a book of wisdom literature to teach you how not to be a fool and how to be wise. Let me read verse 4 again. It says, I adjure you, means I put you under oath. Like, this is a big deal. We've talked about that phrase already. I put you under oath, O daughters of Jerusalem. Do not stir up or awaken love until the time is right. This is the 3rd time she's told him this. You ever had your parents tell you something over and over and over? Now, she's not their parents, but when somebody that's like an influential person in your life tells you something 3 times, this is really important. And in this particular passage, the 3 times that she says this, the word love has a little bit different of a meaning than it will in verses 6 and 7 and other places in the song. And what I mean by that is, if you look at this Hebrew word, but you don't even need the Hebrew lexicon to tell you this, sometimes the word love is used to refer to the physical relationship between a man and a woman. And in this passage, that's what it's doing. And the only way you know this is by looking at the context. And so when you look at the context, it seems like it is talking about what the dictionary describes as sexual desire. Notice in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 15, that this is the definition that's under consideration. The same Hebrew word used for love in Song of Solomon 8, verse 4 is used in 1 Samuel 13, verse 15. This is where Amnon, the sister of Tamar who molested Tamar, after it was over, Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love. That's the same Hebrew word. The Hebrew word's on the left, ahava, and the Greek word agape is how the Greek translation renders it, with which he had loved her. So the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, "Arise and be gone." And in this passage, it's very clear that Amnon never had true love for his sister. He had lust for her and he had sexual desire for her. And in this passage, that's what it was. And so when you're looking at in the English, and even in the original languages, it's the same word, but you got to look at the context to determine which one is it. Is it talking about sexual desire? And a lot of times, that's what the world's talking about when they talk about love. It's just sexual desire. And later in the song, it's actually talking about that deep inward devotion that one person chooses to have towards someone else. We'll develop that in just a little bit. I have a lot more I'd like to say about that word agape, but we'll just have to talk about that at a different time, I guess. Now, as I was saying, point number one, love is not a game. And if you don't believe me, or you don't believe Solomon, because he's the one that's saying this, then you can just ask a Christian who has, in their past, they awakened love before the time was right. And you know, whenever I talk to a Christian who's done that and they're willing to talk about it, they never are glad that they awakened sexual desire before they were married. They're always broken, feeling and sounding. And this is not only just good life advice. If you want to live a happy life, don't awaken sexual desire before you're married. But it's also godly advice. If you want to be in right relationship with God, don't do this. This is not wise. It leaves you feeling like something's wrong because something is wrong when we treat sexual desire like it's a game. And so she puts them under oath because it's that serious. The number two thing we need to learn about love is that love is a family affair. And I take that from what is said in verse 5, the second half of verse 5. Love is not a game, but love is a family affair. Notice in verse 5. Under the apple tree I awakened you. There your mother was in labor with you. There she who bore you was in labor. And this is admittedly a pretty odd verse. There's two parts to it. There's that first part about the apple tree, and there's the second part about her talking about his mama. And let's talk about the apple tree first. So under the apple tree I awakened you. This is the same verb in the Hebrew that she used in that oath that she puts them under from verse 4, interestingly. Notice, reread verse 4, do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. Well, what's it mean to awaken love? Well, in that passage, it means to awaken sexual desire. And then you come to verse 5 in the second half, and the wife is telling her husband, right, and that's in the proper context, that she has awakened him under the apple tree. So you get the idea. There's sometimes the physical relationship of their marriage is very easy to tell, and other times it's subtle. This is one of those subtle references where it's talking about they've consummated their relationship, and not only do we get it from seeing that repetition of the word awaken from that context, but we also get it because of the apple tree. And in the book of Song of Solomon, if you've been paying attention, whenever you read about apples, it's usually a pretty intimate scene. That's putting it nicely. And so let me read to you a passage to prove the point. In chapter 7, verse 8, it says, I said, I will go up to the palm tree, I will take hold of its branches. Let now your breasts be like clusters of the vine, the fragrance of your breath like apples. And I think we understand what's going on there. The Shulamite awakened her husband under the apple tree. And so she's talking back about the consummation of their marriage, and she's kind of reminiscing, if you will. Then the second part of this passage, chapter 8, verse 5 is where we're at, says, there your mother was in labor with you, there she who bore you was in labor. And if the first part of this verse about apples was about the sexual relationship in marriage, the second part is about childbirth, and those two things go together, don't they? Jesus said in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 28, to be fruitful, to multiply, and to fill the earth. He told that to Adam and Eve, the first man and first woman. And one of the primary purposes of the marriage relationship is to reproduce. Now, that's not the only purpose of the marriage relationship. I feel like we've taught that in this series of sermons on the Song of Solomon. Some people act like that's the only purpose of marriage. Well, that is a primary one. That's a primary purpose of the physical relationship, but it's not the only purpose. Beyond that, in the Song of Solomon, this almost the same phrase is used multiple times. Let me review with you. In chapter 3, verse 4, scarcely had I passed by them when I found the one I love. I held him and would not let him go until I had brought him to the house of my mother and into the chamber of her who conceived me. So she keeps repeating this idea of taking your husband to the house of her mother. In chapter 8, verse 2, which we have not read tonight, these are the verses that Thomas covered last time. Just before what we are reading tonight, it says, I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother, she who used to instruct me. And so for their relationship, there was family involvement. And the idea of reproducing and having children and carrying on the family tree and the family being closely involved in this whole marriage situation was a big factor. And we see that in the story of Isaac. In the story of Isaac, his daddy got him a wife, really. Sent to a land and brought Rebekah, his future wife, brought her back home to his mother's house. In the story of Jacob, and now he had two wives, Rachel and Leah, and that would cause big problems for him. That's never a good idea. And he brought both of them back to his mama's house. And that was what they did back then. It was a very much more familial culture than sometimes you see today in our American culture. But this is the idea of true love, wise love, being a community affair, a family affair specifically. And with that being said, I would give you this little piece of advice from experience. So young people, listen up. Now, this doesn't always apply if you have bad parents, okay? But if you think that you have good parents, and you can nod inside, I feel like most of you have good parents. Now, maybe there's some exceptions to that. But if you do, and you're afraid to bring a boy or a girl home to your parents for them to meet them, that's your sign. You're probably dating the wrong person. Most of the time, your parents have your best interest in mind. And they want what's best for you. They also don't want somebody that's going to blow the family up, but they want what's best for you. They really do. And so listen to that. That's how we can apply this in terms of a family affair. Because when you're in love, as people say, you don't see straight. You're blinded. Because sexual desire, that kind of love, that's what's blinding you. That's all you see. And it's keeping you from seeing the signs that everybody else can see, but because you're blind, you can't see them. So love is not a game. Love should be a family affair if you're wise. And number 3, love is permanent. And I think this is probably the most important thing you can learn about love, true love. In verse 6, it says, set me as a seal upon your heart, she tells her husband, as a seal upon your arm, for love is strong as death. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. On Saturday, this past Saturday, Chris and I went to the Opry with some friends, and some of y'all may be familiar with Trace Adkins. He was a country singer in the 90s. Well, he's still alive. He's just not 30 anymore. And he sang a song that I remember hearing a lot on the radio. And I remember, I don't know, I feel like I probably sang it in my car going down the road. It was produced in 1996, but it was still being played when I was in high school in 2010. And anyways, the song was, This Ain't No Thinking Thing. Maybe you've heard that. And if you haven't, you don't need to have heard it to hear these lyrics. So I want to read these lyrics to you. And as he was singing it on Saturday night, I was like, this is not a good song. This is a really not true song. He said, love ain't supposed to make sense. This ain't no thinking thing. Right brain, left brain. It goes a little deeper than that. So you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe he's getting somewhere. And then it's like, no. It's a chemical, physical, emotional devotion, passion that we can't hold back. There's nothing that we need to analyze. There ain't no rhyme or reason why, because this ain't no thinking thing. And it really sounds good. I mean, it's really hard not to bounce your leg to that song when you're hearing Trace Adkins sing that. There ain't no cursing in it. It's not that. That's not why it's a bad song. It's a bad song because it's a lie. It's completely based on emotion, which emotion's not always bad, but when it comes to sexual desire, you don't want to be following your emotion. And that's exactly what this is describing as sexual desire. It's not describing true love. Sexual desire is not permanent. Many waters can quench sexual desire. It will go away before you die. It's not as strong as death. Genuine love from God is a thinking thing. It's a permanent thing. It does take your right brain and your left brain. It's not just raw passion, emotion, and chemical reaction. And that's what you need to understand. Number 3, love is permanent. Notice a couple of the things that she says to her husband. And by this point, they're well married. So this is kind of just speaking present tense about past actions. She says, set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. And what that's talking about, from what I understand, in that time, they would put some type of a emblem like a wedding ring and wear it around their arm. I don't guess wedding rings. Maybe they had wedding rings. But this is the exact same thing as what a wedding ring would be, a seal. A seal was something that identified the person with the seal. And if you were wearing somebody else's seal, that means that you are part of them. You identify with them in a very intimate way. And so this is what wedding rings represent. Notice what Ian Duguide says in his commentary. He says, the heart was the seat of a person's thoughts and feelings, their inner self. We've talked about that recently on Sermons on the Heart. While the arm was the locus of a person's actions or power, basically the hub of somebody's power. Together they represent the whole person. The woman wants to be constantly by his side and in his thoughts, an integral part of his identity. That's what she's communicating when she says, put my seal on your arm and on your heart, and vice versa. We say whenever we, in a marriage ceremony, you take the ring and you put it on the other person's finger. And I think we said this in our wedding. I give you this ring as a symbol of my love. I don't know if we said those words exactly, but we said something close to those. It's a symbol of your devotion, not just some chemical reaction. And I have heard people say, so I thought I would just take this opportunity. I've heard people say that wedding rings are unscriptural. It was kind of bizarre, and it was in a weird conversation with somebody at work, I think, years ago. But just so you know, wedding rings are scriptural. They're right here. So that's not true. And the second thing that I would bring out about this is that a ring is a symbol of permanency of a person's love for their spouse. And some people, I remember my dad, at one point, he had had his ring on for so long it wouldn't come off. And I've heard other people say that too. Eventually, they got to lose some weight, and eventually it falls off, But it literally has been on there so long that you just forget it's there because you're so committed in your marriage relationship. He also says, she says in this, beyond put my seal on your heart, she says, for love is strong as death, many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. And this is, again, speaking of the permanency of love. Just as permanent as death is, with very few exceptions, and where people were raised from the dead, death is permanent. The grave is permanent. And once you're there, you're not coming back. That's how permanent love is, or true love. And so we say in our wedding ceremonies, a lot of times, the bride will say to the husband and vice versa, until death do us part. That means nothing in our culture anymore. I don't even know if people say that anymore in their weddings. If they are, they're lying, 90% of them, because I was talking to some guys the other day and was talking about how everybody that they work with is divorced, and it's like you got to be divorced to work at this place. And that's about how it is anymore. That's how it is in the ER where I work in Murray. It does not mean till death do us part when people get married anymore. It means till my emotions run out and I get mad at you. That's what they should be saying, because that's what they mean. That's what everybody means. But what did I tell you Inky Johnson said about commitment? Commitment is staying true to what you said you would do long after the mood that you said it in. And marriage is not always fun. We talk about marriage is fun. But true love will get you through the not fun parts. And quoting from The Princess Bride, death cannot stop true love. All it can do is delay it for a while. I had to throw in a line from that because, well, it's just true about true love. Number 4, love is jealous. So love is not a game. Love is, what did I say before? I'm already forgetting. A family affair. I put myself on the spot all the time up here. Love is permanent, and love is jealous. Doesn't that sound wrong? Love is jealous? I thought jealousy was a bad thing, you say. Well, it says jealousy is fierce as the grave, and she's saying this in connection with love somehow. And in fact, I'll bring this out in a moment, but jealousy is a parallel to the word love. We'll see that in just a moment. But jealousy goes with exclusiveness, like peanut butter goes with jelly. They were meant for each other. They go together. When you talk about somebody being jealous, you're talking about they have a deep relationship of exclusivity. Nobody else belongs in that relationship. And that shows how much the person cares. In Exodus chapter 20 and verse 5, we understand that God is a jealous God, and marriage is based on God's relationship with the church, Jesus' relationship with the church. It says in the 10 Commandments, you shall not bow down to carved images, nor serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. And jealousy within a marriage is a good thing. And if you want your significant other to know that you don't care about them, then don't be jealous when someone else starts flirting with them. They want you to notice. They want you to be jealous to a degree. It bothers God when we split our affections between Him and other things, is usually what we split it between. But God is a jealous God, and He's jealous, meaning that He loves us, and He doesn't want to share us with anybody. Just like a husband shouldn't want to share his wife with any other man, and a woman shouldn't want to share her husband with any other woman. Notice the parallels, like I said before. For love is strong as death. Jealousy is fierce as the grave. And in biblical language, you can just substitute jealousy and love out. I mean, there's obviously nuanced differences, but they're sharing the same idea here. You can see by the repetition of the symbol of death in the grave. The deeper the love, the deeper the jealousy. And I would say, I'll just say as a side remark, that if you have somebody that's, you would say, too jealous, and they get jealous about everything, then it's probably not jealousy that they have a problem with. It's probably controlling and manipulation they have a problem with. It's probably the fear of losing somebody because they lost somebody in the past. It's a fear. It's not jealousy. As far as I can tell in the Bible, jealousy is a good thing. When you really are talking about jealousy, these other things that people get like jealous of petty little things is more about control and fear than it is about that true quality that's described as God. Number 5, true love is of the Lord. Notice verse 6. It says, it's flat, and this is again describing love, its flashes are flashes of fire, the very flame of the Lord. Now, this is a translational difficulty, this verse, and so I put different translations here for you to look at. And I put the Hebrew word that's being translated on the left there, and I'll draw attention to that in just a moment. But notice the New King James, it says the last phrase, it says, love is a most vehement flame. The Christian Standard Bible says an almighty flame, and the New American Standard, along with the ESV, which I read before, says the flame of the Lord. Now those are quite different translations. And what's going on is that, and this is perfect timing because Etienne talked about who God is and went over all the names of God on Sunday afternoon. If you missed it, it'll be up on the YouTube page soon, and it was really good. Now, what he brought attention to is the name Yahweh. And we don't really know how that is pronounced, but that's how we pronounce it, Yahweh. Well, the first part of that name is Yah. And you can see that's the word in the Hebrew that's used at the end of this verse and is being translated. And the difficulty is to know it falls at the end of this word that means flame. And so it means the flame of Yah, the flame of God, or the flame of the Lord. Now, some translations, like the New King James translation, they believe that God's name is being used as a superlative to kind of take that part of God that means almighty and describe an almighty flame. And it's not necessarily describing the flame of the Lord, but it's just talking about love as a very powerful almighty flame. Does that make sense? And so it's using the name of God as kind of a suffix to try to bring out that quality of how strong this flame is. But the Christian Standard Bible, or the New American Standard Bible on the far right, and the ESV and others, they believe that this is saying love is as strong as the flame of the Lord, or it's like that in some way. And I believe that's probably the case. I don't know that it's really probably in your interest, but if you're more interested in this, I have more thoughts on this. But I do believe that far right translation is probably the one that's intended. Interestingly, this is the only place in the Song of Solomon where God's name appears at all. And so if you take, and I don't take the position that it's actually the Lord's name being signified here because I want his name to show up in the book. I really am not taking that position for that reason. But nonetheless, that's the case. I've heard people say Song of Solomon and Esther are the only books in the Bible where God's name isn't mentioned. And if this truly is the only occurrence in the Song of Solomon, then Esther's the only book where God's actual name is not mentioned out of all 66 books. Interesting fact, but just something to tuck away. Now, when the Shulamite says this, that love's flame is the flame of the Lord, she's talking about its strength and its permanence. So getting back to the point, she's talking about how strong true love is by comparing it. First, she compared it to death and the grave. It's as permanent as those things, and now she's comparing it to the flame of the Almighty God. So that means two things. It's divine in origin, and it's as strong as God's ever-burning flame. So notice this statement from Douglas Sean O'Donnell. What is being suggested is that the love depicted here, and hence in the song as a whole, has its ultimate source in Yahweh and indeed partakes of his very nature. And I thought that was very good. True love can only come from one of two places. It can come from the devil or it can come from the Lord. That's your two options. And it ain't coming from the devil. So it's obviously coming from the Lord if it's true love. Now, unbridled passion can come from the devil, if that's what you mean by love, but not true love. In Exodus chapter 3 and verse 2, what do we mean by the flame of the Lord? Moses came to this cavern where there was a flame appearing, and the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. What have we been talking about? Love is like the flame of the Lord. What do we mean by that? Well, it's as permanent as death. It can't be quenched by any amount of water. It burns forever. It's permanent is the idea. Just as God is permanent, he's eternal. True love never burns out. A lot of people call things love that are not genuine love, but those things don't endure to the grave like true love does. In the Bible, Paul says true love endures all things. He says love never fails. Well, let's move on to the last thing you need to know. Love isn't a game. Love is a family affair. Love is permanent. Love is jealous. True love is of the Lord, and love isn't for sale. That's what she says at the end of it. She says it's not for sale. In verse 7, the last verse we'll read, at least in the song, if a man offered for love all the wealth of his house, he would be utterly despised. Some things are not for sale, unfortunately. I read a headline today. It just popped up on Google. I wasn't even searching for it. It just so happened to be perfect for this sermon. There was a Kentucky family who owns a farm. And the headline said, Kentucky family says it turned down $26 million from AI giant to keep farmland. They wanted to put an AI development center there on their farmland. And so you can imagine this land shark coming to them and saying, I'll give you $1 million for this acreage. And they said, it's not for sale. And he says, I'll give you $10 million for this acreage. And they said, I don't think you heard me. It's not for sale. And you know, some of these people, they got such an ego. They think if they have as much money as they don't have more than they can even do with. And they said, I'll give you $26 million for this acreage. And the family's probably saying, I don't know how dumb you are, but you can't hear what I'm saying. It's not for sale. Some things are not for sale. And I love this definition by Mr. Duguide. He says, love cannot be bought and sold. It's a single-hearted, lifelong, jealous devotion between one man and one woman. And that's one of the best definitions of love I've ever read. You might write that down if you wanted to know what love is. I mean, I've heard a lot of sermons on love. I've given sermons on love, and I don't know if I've ever heard a definition quite that good. And he's taking there the elements of Song of Solomon 8, verses 5 through 7, and he's summing them up. And that's what you get. That's what love is. So in summary, love is not a game. Love is a family affair. Love is permanent. Love is jealous. True love is of the Lord. Love is not for sale. Love is a single-hearted, lifelong, jealous devotion between one man and one woman. That's our study this afternoon or this evening, and I appreciate y'all's attention.
This is your wake-up call to come and serve the Lord. Casting the world aside, come in and worship.
Welcome to the Chapel Grove Church of Christ. My name is Aaron Battey. I've been a member here for several years now, and I just wanted to introduce you to our church, what it's all about. We've been here since the early 1930s, which is really a long time for a church to be around, and I don't think that happens by accident. But to tell you more about what our church is about and why it's such a great place to be a part of the family, let's just hear it straight from our members.
The most important thing to me about a church is that they're dedicated to God and that they get their truth from the Bible, which Chapel Grove definitely has.
Because of the people here. It's a church family that I think is like none other.
Because you can feel a real connection and genuine love between its members.
Because of all the family.
I like playing with my friends at Chapel Grove because my friends on it and singing.
It's Bible-based, and you have a lot of people here who care about you greatly.
The fact that all the elders and evangelists and each member really, the amount of effort that they put into making sure everything that you hear preached from the pulpit is backed by Scripture.
Because it has been very supportive of me over the 27 years I've been here.
Because it's such a great place to raise our family. We love our friends here.
Because of the family atmosphere we have here and the strength and encouragement that we get to follow God.
I was completely welcomed into Chapel Grove with open arms, and I was treated like a family member and immediately invited to Bible studies, over to people's houses for supper.
You know, it's not an immediate rush once the services are over for everybody to leave and go their separate ways all week long.
With that said, we want to invite you to come visit us sometime in person. Every Sunday morning we worship at 10 a.m. where we partake of the Lord's Supper. We have teaching, prayer, and a cappella singing. In the afternoon, it's at 5 p.m. on Sundays. Every third Sunday is at 2 p.m. and we'll stick around and have lunch together on the grounds. Wednesday nights are at 7 p.m. So come check us out at any time. You can find our contact if you have more questions at our website at chapelgrovechurch.com.
Open your heart and mind to share the living word. Come and worship, worship the King. Gather together now, we come to serve you, Lord. Laying our burdens down, we come to worship.